It's not really a surprise to find that Batman has one of the best rogues gallery out of any DC hero. Almost all of the colorful characters the Bat has to fight on a nightly basis are these incredibly complex, interesting bad guys that definitely make life harder for the Caped Crusader. But which Batman villain is the most dangerous? That's what I'm here today to find out. Join me as I rank Batman's most dangerous villains. What exactly constitutes dangerous? Like, how are the Court of Owls more dangerous than Bane? Well, let's find out right now. Just to be clear, I think all of the Bat's enemies are dangerous. You and I would probably never want to meet any of them. But if I had to choose one of these villains to go up against, yeah, it would probably be Two-Face. The former district attorney Harvey Dent was once Gotham's White Knight. But then that pesky acid attack scarred half his face and shattered his fragile psyche into two halves. Now constantly referring to himself as we, Two-Face likes to perform all sorts of crimes that reflect chance and duality. But of course, we need to talk about the coin. If you or I were ever about to be gunned down by Two-Face, he would flip his coin to decide whether we live or not. So that means I have a 50-50 chance at survival. That's better odds than a lot of other villains on this list, which is why Two-Face ranks at the bottom. And he's good at a lot of villainous things, but I wouldn't say he's the best at them. Like, yeah, he's a criminal mastermind and a solid crime lord and an overall good marksman, but he's not necessarily the best or the most dangerous in any of those things. I love Two-Face, but someone had to be last. The Riddler is another villain that can be very dangerous, yes, but also he has a fundamental flaw that makes sure you at least always have a chance to beat him. The Riddler is normally a raging egomaniac who wants to prove he's the smartest person in the world and constantly trying to outwit Batman. But here's the thing, his raging ego is so powerful that he has to let it be known it was him who committed certain crimes. Like, for example, say he robbed a bank. If you or I robbed a bank, we'd probably want to keep it a secret, right? Well, for Edward Nygma, he would want to leave a calling card and a detailed list of how exactly he pulled off the crime. So again, he's one of those people who will at least give you a way out of your predicament. If he traps you in a puzzle box of some sort, it's not an automatic game over for you. No, if you're smart enough, you could logically rescue yourself. And if you could escape whatever trap was set and you found yourself face to face with the Riddler, you could most likely win in a fight. See, Riddler is a thinker, not a brawler, and I think one solid punch to the nose would have him crumple like a house of cards. But hey, I also should note that this video is being made before the release of the upcoming Robert Pattinson Batman movie, which features the Riddler as the main villain. Maybe this reimagining will show us all how dangerous the Riddler could be. When it comes to Mr. Freeze, you can sorta understand where he's coming from. Yes, he's dabbled in other crimes over the years, but normally what he's most known for is wanting to save his wife Nora's life. She suffers from an illness that leaves her cryogenically frozen, and eventually that leads to Victor Freeze suffering an accident that transforms him into a cold-blooded life form that must always be kept at sub-zero temperatures or else he wouldn't survive. Hey, kinda convenient that Victor Freeze suffered an ice-related origin story, right? What are the odds of that? So yeah, everything that Mr. Freeze does, he does in the name of saving Nora. Yes, he may try to rob people or start his own criminal empire, but that's just to raise enough money to further his research. The healthcare system is kind of rough, isn't it? So that's why I rank Mr. Freeze relatively low on this list. Yes, that freeze ray gun he has is something you don't want to get hit by, and yes, fighting Mr. Freeze in the Arkham City game was a huge pain, but as long as you're not actively trying to stop his research, then he'll mostly leave you alone. Oswald Cobblepot, also known as the Penguin, is a Gotham City mobster who fancies himself a gentleman. I mean, he usually rocks a monocle and a top hat, which everyone knows is the essence of being a gentleman. So yes, Penguin is obviously dangerous since he's one of the top crime lords in all of Gotham and always tends to land on his feet when things go wrong. He's the type of criminal where if he wants someone gone, he'll hire some goon to make sure they're never heard from again. And he should never be taken lightly, but just everyone else who appears on this list is more of a threat to Batman and Gotham City. Because yes, Penguin is a bad dude, but he also wants a semblance of order and organization to his criminal dealings. That's someone Batman can deal with relatively easily. He's almost always the lesser of two evils. I would say the most dangerous thing about him, besides his ruthless criminal mindset, is his collection of deadly umbrellas. You see a guy carrying an umbrella and you're not that scared, but then the umbrella turns into a gun or a knife or a sword or a mini helicopter or some wild thing, and suddenly you're not laughing anymore. As far as powers go, Clayface has a pretty sweet deal. Like, yes, his normal, natural form is a gigantic, monstrous, clay-like goo monster, which can't be fun at parties, but his powers consist of being able to shapeshift and morph into anyone he chooses. That's pretty helpful in Gotham City, especially when all the other villains out there stand out so much. Like Mr. Freeze, good luck blending in at your local diner, right? Clayface can just turn into anyone and go to a movie or something whenever he wants. And there have been a lot of different Clayfaces out there, which is a little surprising until you realize Gotham City is a horrible place to live, and people are turned into gigantic Clayfaces all the time, though he's not without his weaknesses. Cold temperatures are bad for his clay body, explosives are bad for his clay body, certain chemicals are bad for his clay body. You get the point. He also can't maintain the shapeshifts for too long without breaking apart. Poison Ivy has had a long comic history, and even though she started off as a villain, she's slowly morphed into more anti-hero territory. She's not necessarily evil, but she just wants people to stop wrecking the gosh darn planet. But Poison Ivy is dangerous for a lot of reasons. 1. Have you ever tried fighting a gigantic man-eating plant with a ton of vines and thorns and poisonous barbs sticking out everywhere? No, but I can't imagine that would be fun. I'd so rather deal with Penguin and his goons rather than fight Poison Ivy anywhere there's plant life. And if that wasn't enough, Poison Ivy is dangerous because of how she could seduce and mind control people using certain pheromones. So again, remember to water your plants and not let them rot, or else you might be getting a house call from Dr. Pamela Isley. Hugo Strange is one of the most dangerous villains for Batman, and he's actually one of Batman's oldest bad guys, appearing in Detective Comics number 36, which is kind of fun. He's also one of the more prominent villains who deduced Batman's secret identity. And no, it wasn't because Hugo used common sense to deduce that Bruce Wayne and Batman were never in the same spot at the same time. It happened when Strange was running a fake hospital for Gotham's wealthiest citizens, and he got a peek inside Bruce's mind and was able to figure it out. I'm sure that's a scary place. Anyways, what does Strange ultimately want to do with this information? At first, he tries to make Bruce's life a living nightmare, but eventually his goal is to actually become Batman himself. Yeah, good luck with that, Strange. But he's ranked so high because of what he was able to figure out. The whole secret identity is crucial for the Batman character, so anyone who can solve that puzzle immediately becomes dangerous. Also, side note, isn't it weird we haven't seen Hugo Strange in a live-action movie yet? I don't know if you guys remember this, but after The Dark Knight came out in 2008 and fans were clamoring for the next film, I remember the rumor that the next film would center around Hugo Strange figuring out Batman's identity and causing trouble. But then we were surprised to find out that that actually was the plot of the Batman Arkham City game. Man, that game was awesome. I'm going to add one entry here that isn't a normally seen Batman rogue, but is dangerous enough where he deserves a spot on this list. With the Dark Multiverse presenting a whole mess of problems for Batman as it introduced a bunch of different Dark Knights who represented all the worst parts of Batman, the most dangerous out of all of those was the Batman Who Laughs, which means a Batman-Joker hybrid. And if that wasn't bad enough, the Batman Who Laughs also acquired Dr. Manhattan's powers through some brain transplant shenanigans. Basically, he becomes a crazy villain with the powers of a god and the ability to travel through dimensions, which is so unfair. Maybe he should be number one on this list, but really he's just too powerful to count in my opinion, and his storyline just continues to get crazier. When Jason Todd was resurrected and took on the mantle of Red Hood, he became basically the physical reminder and embodiment of Batman's biggest failure. Not only did Batman have to watch Jason Todd's Robin get brutally executed by the Joker, but then he had to face his ghost when he came back as a violent vigilante known as Red Hood. Red Hood has all his Robin training, but less of a moral code when it comes to taking out criminals, and that often puts him at odds with Batman. If you're a fan of the animated DC movies, then I think the Under the Red Hood animated film is top-notch, and really shows not only how dangerous Red Hood can be, but how his presence completely shakes Batman's core and makes him question what he stands for. I would love to see a live-action Hush adaptation someday because the Batman Hush arc is amazing, but let's look at all the ways Tommy Elliott is incredibly dangerous for Batman. We know Hush is capable of masterminding elaborate schemes that adversely affect Batman, he's incredibly focused on nothing but completely destroying Bruce Wayne, and he has a wide range of skills including being an expert marksman and a highly proficient hand-to-hand fighter. Plus, those surgeon skills always come in handy when Hush needs to perform plastic surgery on himself. Yeah, you don't want this guy as your enemy. I love Bane. He's one of those super unfair villains who has both an incredible brain and immense brawn. Like, everyone remembers Bane breaking Batman's back, but not enough credit is given to Bane leading up to this moment. He spends a solid chunk of time analyzing Batman from a distance, organizing prison breaks in order to wear him down, and is even able to deduce his secret identity. Add to that the venom drug that usually is coursing through his veins, and you got yourself an incredibly dangerous Bat villain. I always find the Court of Owls to be one of the best new additions to the Bat mythos in the 2010s. They're a super secret organized crime group made up of the wealthy elite of Gotham and have pulled the strings from the shadows since colonial times. Their reach and influence seem everywhere, and if you're worried that a bunch of rich Gothamites couldn't fight well, don't sweat it, they actually kidnap child performers from the circus and make them assassins known as Talons. I just like how they basically stand for everything Batman fights against, which is corruption at the highest level. And I would bet money we'll see Robert Pattinson's Batman deal with a version of the Court of Owls sooner rather than later. With Robert Pattinson as Batman, we're entering a whole new era of the Bat. But let's not forget what almost was. Before Ben Affleck stepped away from the role, he was working on a solo movie that by all accounts would have pitted Batman against Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke. And even though we'll never see that specific pairing happen, it's still a lot of fun to think about. Deathstroke is one of the best outright assassins in all of DC Comics. Like, seriously, do you all remember Identity Crisis? This arc saw Deathstroke take on almost the entire JLA and almost win with his strategy and cunning. Is it super realistic? Maybe not, but it's still an awesome moment. The comic tells us that Deathstroke uses 90% of his brain power, unlike the rest of us who use 10%. And after seeing this, I believe it. He takes out the Flash first by diverting him with explosives so Slade could stab in a certain place where he knew Flash would be. He then takes out Zatanna by punching her in a very specific spot that causes her to throw up and not speak. He then targets the long-range fighters by slicing off the harness for Hawkman's wings, causing him to plummet to the ground. And then Green Arrow is next up, and in an instant he swings his blade that looks like it's going for Green Arrow's head, but actually destroys all his arrow tails, rendering Green Arrow a little useless. Then he wraps a bag around Black Canary's head so she can't sing, followed by him having good enough vision to actually see the Atom in his small shrunken form and takes him out too. Then he breaks Green Lantern's hand so he can't use his ring. It's an insane sequence. Now imagine that sort of tactical mind against Batman. I want to see that movie someday, right? On paper, Ra's al Ghul is sort of unfair. On one hand, he's an incredible fighter, swordsman, weapons user who would most likely cut you down before you even realize it. But then, even if you manage to get a lucky hit on him and take him out, it doesn't even matter. He has the handy-dandy Lazarus Pit at his disposal that basically makes him immortal. Yeah, sure, the Lazarus Pit has some extreme side effects like with Jason Todd, but Ra's seems pretty well adjusted to its effect by now, and it's granted him an extremely long life, where he's amassed all sorts of knowledge and wisdom. So already that's a dangerous villain, right? But then add in the fact that he's the leader of the League of Assassins, one of the most secretive and deadly organizations in all of DC, and you got yourself one of the most dangerous Batman villains of all time. Because when you fight him, it's not just him, but a whole hodgepodge of assassins who serve his bidding, all of which are expertly trained. He usually wants to save the world by destroying a lot of the population, and we're just lucky that sometimes he sees Batman as someone who could take over for him as head of the Demon one day, at least in the early days. Joker is the most dangerous Batman villain. I mean, for real, was anyone else ever going to top the list? Yes, Joker isn't the strongest Bat villain, or even the smartest. He isn't the master of some game-changing technology, and he doesn't have a really dangerous superpower. Nope, the clown is just insane and doesn't play by any rules. He is truly unpredictable, and that's what makes him so terrifying. Like everyone else on this list either mostly wants something or has their own guidelines. Two-Face is bad, but he'll always follow what the coin says. The Riddler may cook up some twisted puzzle, but there's always a way to solve it. The Penguin wants to rule the criminal underworld. Deathstroke is usually under contract, yet none of that applies to Joker, who will always do whatever he wants at any given time. He's also the most dangerous Batman villain because of what he brings out in Batman. It's pretty well established that Batman and Joker are like some twisted mirror versions of one another. It feels like one cannot exist without the other one. Look at the Dark Knight movie where Heath Ledger's Joker talks about how they're going to to be doing this forever. Or look at comic stories like The Dark Knight Returns, where we see how once Batman retired, Joker basically went catatonic and then snapped out of it once Batman returned years later. As long as there's Batman, there will be a Joker, and that element makes Joker the most dangerous villain of all. Because what are we gonna do, just stop telling Batman stories and having Batman movies? Yeah, right. How do you think Batman's Rogues Gallery compares to Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery? If the two sets of villains were somehow all placed in a battle world scenario, who do you think would come out on top? Honestly, I think my money is on Batman's villains. What do you think?